KSL Television presents Portrait of Success, a salute to personal achievement by Utah people in the pioneer spirit. I'm Bernie Calderwood. Success stories are best, we feel, when they include the kind of daring, vision, and the integrity and general attitude that characterized much of what we choose to call the pioneer spirit. Now, this spirit prevailed in the early days of Utah. Truly successful people, in our opinion, are those who not only achieve success in their business ventures, but who also conduct their personal lives in such a way that we find qualities that we can admire and which we might learn from. My guests today are two gentlemen representing an industry in Utah that we feel is probably as excellent modern-day pioneering story as we could find in the whole state. On my left is Mr. Gene Pace, dairy farmer and president of Highlands Dairy. On my right is Mr. Lou Curtis, who is Highlands general manager, and I welcome you both to Channel 5. Gentlemen, today we're going to talk about a group of people who had to have a kind of a pioneer touch, I feel, in order to accomplish what they set out to do. These were people with a dream, people who devoted their lives and energies to an idea that grew, and people who like to stand on their own feet. Isn't that what we're talking about here?
That's right.
We're talking about the gentleman who in 1939 in Camas, Utah, sat down and organized what was then called the Highland Dairymen's Association. Is that correct?
This is correct.
Were you connected with that group in the early days, Mr. Pace?
No, sir, I was not.
But that was organized in Camas in 1939.
That's right.
Well, gentlemen, at that particular time, can we go into a little bit of what had been happening at that time, Mr. Pace or Mr. Curtis, either one? We had just come out of the Depression. Things weren't really too good, were they?
Farmers were having a very difficult time around 1939.
Mm-hmm.
They had a real problem, and one was marketing. They felt that they should become interested in the market, and they felt that they could do a much better job.
What was the plight of the dairy farmer in those days, Mr. Pace?
Well, the dairy farmer found that he wasn't able to get as much for his milk as to keep him alive, him and his family, actually.
So the idea then of this group of dairy farmers in Camas, Utah, was to protect themselves in the same manner that the old wagon train would pull into a circle to protect themselves against the Indians, I suppose.
This is after the same order.
How did they organize? What did they originally do?
Well, it's necessary for them to raise capital.
Mm-hmm.
They raised the necessary capital by assessing themselves $10 per cow.
$10 a cow.
As I recall, they raised about $6,000.
Isn't that something? Now, they sat down and they had to do something on their dream, and at that particular time, gentlemen, the organization also drafted certain resolutions, as I understand it, upon which to base their activities from then on. And as I recall, there were 4 of them. Now, we can see them on the monitor here, and I'd like to comment on these briefly. A small, effective board of directors. They would process their own milk. They'd build their sales on their own production, aim for products of highest quality. Now, have there been any changes in the last 30-some-odd years, 30 years, from those original concepts?
No, sir. Those 4 original concepts have still remained in force and added to, of course, from time to time.
But those still remain the heart of the philosophy of the
Yes,
dairy
sir.
group. Now, this was organized then to give an outlet for these people's products and to allow them to, on their own initiative, to provide for their families and provide a market for their product. Is that right, Chip?
Yes, about this time, the paper container came along.
Yes.
And this opened an entirely new field for them. It enabled them to ship milk rather great distances, and this sort of became the container for the grocer.
Well, they had to have a place to bottle, too, so as I recall from this Highland story, there was a little piece of property out in the Murray area that had an artesian well on it. We are looking at it now, and a rather broken down tomato canning plant, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's right.
And they built this up into the little plant we'll see next here. And this is the way, pretty much the way Highland started out, as I understand it. Now, you've mentioned the paper carton. These people that organized the association, they had to have a competitive edge, did they not? With the Depression just over with and the wartime economy on, they had to have something to build their dream upon. They couldn't just say, we have a good idea. So I wonder how they latched onto this idea here. Can you answer that, Mr. Pace, what they did?
Well, this paper carton, their first bottle of milk was put in this paper carton. There was no paper distributed in the Salt Lake area at that particular time.
So immediately they had dared to be somewhat different.
This is true.
Test market, in effect, a brand new thing in this area.
Of course, the competitors right at first laughed at whoever heard of such a thing as milk in a paper.
But one large competitor copied you, and as a result, the Supreme Court finally had to rule in Highland's favor, as I understand it. They said, now look, Highland dairy people here have used this successfully, and you can't copy, which is a wonderful thing. But you did introduce and pioneer this paper carton in the area. Now, I can go back, gentlemen, may I digress for just a moment, to when you first came into the scene. I had the great privilege of being on children's radio shows, and from the very beginning, you began to let people know what you had as well. And consequently, your volume continued to grow, not only because of your quality and your processing and delivery system you built, but also because of the fact that you let people know you were here. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Look what they've done. You started out with 192,000 some odd in 1941. And I understand now, $20 million volume in 1968. I would consider that pretty good pioneering, wouldn't you?
Well, it's pretty good growth.
One thing that I would like to bring out, gentlemen, was this. There was a need also, in order to continue their dream, to be able to have the kind of quality control that was wanted. And Mr. Curtis, that's where you entered the scene. You have your Ph.D. in microbiology, I understand.
Yes, that's right.
And when you first came in, it was with the express purpose of building upon a very rigid quality control program at the dairy. Now, aside from the fact that quality does sell products, what's the philosophy behind wanting to do something just a little bit better than someone else, or provide a little better product? Can you gentlemen give us an insight into this as an idea that perhaps our young people watching might consider?
Well, when I joined Highland, I was very pleased at their attitude. They were committed to quality. For example, when I asked for a microscope, I was very surprised that they were willing to give us a microscope and set up a modern laboratory.
Excellent. Mr. Pace, you entered the scene in what year? With the group, with the Highland?
It was 1940. They'd been going less than a year when I joined the organization.
And you have been with them since. And with respect to this quality control program, what is your philosophy on this? Obviously, you have a fine setting for the cattle in the Camas area. Obviously, Utah milk is potentially superior to others. We'd like to think so, and all tests indicate this. But you have been in on this from almost the beginning. What is your thinking of the philosophy of the company as such, as a service to the community?
Well, the company always took the attitude that if it could be, any product could be produced with a higher quality, it ought to be. There's nothing too good for the consumer, we feel, and from that very day on, we have always paid a little bonus price for quality milk that reached a certain quality.
In 1967, some $35,000 in bonus money was provided for those who provided extra quality milk. Is that right?
That's true. That's over and above their regular pay.
Now, this is an incentive thing we're talking about then, is it not, Mr. Curtis?
Yes, their bonus program has really paid off, and being the owners of Highland, we feel they always take more interest in the product.
Is this kind of a pioneering thing, too, the bonus idea for quality? It seems to me that this is an idea that could well catch on in other areas other than the dairy industry, really. I think it's an interesting concept in the beginning.
Well, actually, all the products that are sold on the market is graded, and I don't know what other products has paid a bonus for a top grade, but I'm sure there's many of them.
Well, it's a wonderful thing. But what we're really talking about then is here we have a line of products we're seeing on the screen right now, gentlemen, that you've built upon those original concepts and added to those the idea of continuous growth in quality and continuous rigid control, and to perform a real service to the people in our area, and I appreciate that much. Don't you think then what we are really talking about is the attitude of giving just a little bit more than you really have to give?
Yes.
And this is the pioneer spirit, I think. Mr. Curtis, I appreciate your being here today, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Pace, thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today. We have seen people with a dream, people with the capability to act on that dream, and I think that's what the pioneer spirit is all about. And we thought the Highland story is an excellent example of a modern pioneering story. Join us again next time for a brief portrait of success.